Here we go again from the road, buddy.
I mean, you're on the road. I'm here in the hub. But yeah, we're together. We were apart. We were together. Now we're apart again. But yeah, you're in Wisconsin. I'm in Chattanooga, and or wherever you are listening across the United States. Welcome. Today is August. Gosh, I can't believe it's still August. August 6, 2021, and welcome aboard. This is the Crushing Iron podcast, and we are episode 501. Blazing right through. Celebrated 500 for like 2 seconds. Now we're back where we need to be. Just going back to the basics.
Yep, back on the. Thank God that whole ceremonial thing is over.
Just keep the ball rolling. You only get to the good places because you're just consistent. You don't get too hung up. You don't get too high. You don't get too low. You just kind of keep. Listen, if we've proved anything over the last 5 years, is that consistent mediocrity leads to mediocre success. And I feel like that's one of the main things we can at least confidently say to the general public is, being mediocre takes consistent work, and that's what we do. We are consistent, we are mediocre, and we get some praise here and there, we get some, negative here and there, but for the most part, hey, we're still here. We're still sticking around. We'll do this for another 499 episodes. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. You have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, and that your time is valuable. So we appreciate you giving us some of that today. Mike and I come to you twice a week. We always have something we're very proud of. That's what led us to getting to 500. We have been consistent. So we usually come to you Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice a week. We cover it all. We cover triathlon. We cover life. We'll do in-depth race previews. We'll do race recaps. We'll have on the very, very occasional guest. But for the most part, Mike and I just sit back, relax as best friends, coaches, and athletes ourselves, and have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through, what we know our athletes are going through. We work with hundreds of athletes across the globe, not just locally. I would say we get that question a lot. We are both based in obviously Chattanooga and live in Tennessee, but I would say that like 3% of our athlete base actually lives in Tennessee. So while we coach a little bit locally and have our hub here, the majority of our athletes are worldwide and obviously majority in the U.S. But we use what they're going through to drive the topic of the conversation of the day, especially with the race season being so basically full on now. Everybody's kind of going through their. It's almost time for the Ironman freakout, and we may or may not get into that today. Oftentimes we'll also pop into our Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group on Facebook. If you want to answer one simple question, we'll let you in. There's a lot of awesome people in there, from beginners, people who focus on short course, people focus on long course. You got people who have never participated in a triathlon, all the way up to Kona qualifiers, Ironman champions, and the like. So a lot of great people in there. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. You're not going to get a lot of sarcasm and negativity in there, because if they have, they're no longer there, because I have a short leash when it comes to.
Yeah, you do, man.
I do. I have listen, so do you. We're protective of our community. That's what kind of keeps it where it is. But that's it. We have no sponsors, we have no ads, and if you listen to us so far, you're like, no wonder you guys don't have any sponsors or ads, because you can't keep a train of thought. We have one agenda: is to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
I got two questions for you right now.
Already? I'm questioned out this week, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple. What's the Ironman freakout, and B, if you could have one guest, do you think we should have a guest? And if it has to be somebody other than Ken Hammond, who do you think it might be?
Ooh. That's a tough one, because I'll be honest with you, like I don't know that I like having guests.
Yeah, it's tough. Right?
It is. It's very, very tough. Like, you and I, we can just like seamlessly do our thing and have zero. I mean, and this may come to a surprise, but to have no agenda and no outline and no like schedule, and we don't go through like, the list of our pre-show meeting. We just kind of go with the flow, and I love that, because I don't feel like it's scripted. And to be honest with you, I feel like our listeners appreciate that too, because it's not scripted. And I hate things that feel scripted. I hate feeling like I'm being pushed a product or a plan or anything. I ain't being pushed anything. And so I just feel not uncomfortable. It's just awkward. The timing's awkward. You don't know how to read people when they're on. And to be honest, like we get 1 or 2 emails a week from people being like, hey, I work for, PR, or I'm the agent for so-and-so, we would love to be on your podcast. I'm like, well, thanks, but what are you going to do for us? Like, we're just giving you like free pub. It's like, it's not really a tit for tat. It's like, hey, showcase our person. We have really no interest in your podcast itself, but let our listeners, your listeners take advantage of the book that I just wrote. And I'd love to be on your show. Of course you would, because it's free advertising. So I don't really know that I don't really know that I have anybody that I'd like to have on.
What about if a big guest? See, that's the whole thing, right? Is like that would just completely destroy the karma of everything that we're doing. I think is if we all of a sudden had 50,000 downloads because Rich Roll came on or something like that.
I mean, yeah, you're exactly right, and that's our thing. Like we're not the headline band that Listen, we want to be a mediocre band that you guys come. You guys come to all of our concerts. They're easy to sell out because only 400 people come. We don't get huge stadiums and amphitheaters. We're just low key, but we always sell out. You guys buy shirts when you come. You buy our CDs, you download our whole album because we have like a very niche fan base. We don't want to be like a one-hit wonder. We don't want to be like Shaggy, the artist, or we don't like one great song. That's what guests are. They come to because that's what I do. Like if and when I ever listen to a podcast, it's only because of the guest. It's not because of the host. I go listen to the guest because I want to know what they have to say. And it's almost always a coach that's on another podcast talking about how they coach and science, stuff like that. So that's the only reason I listen. So I generally have I could care less who the host is as long as they're doing like a decent job. I always listen for the guest. So nah, I don't really. I mean, what about yourself? Like, do you have like a guest you'd love to have on that's alive or not alive? I mean,
would you invite to dinner?
Yeah, I mean, I would invite a Kobe Bryant for sure. But yeah, I mean, Katie Ledecky probably too.
On the cast?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'd have them on just because I'd feel like it'd be neat to talk to somebody at that level. But I think the conversation would probably be weird because they don't care about triathlon. So, but yeah, do you have a person you would pick the brains of?
I don't know, man. I'm like I'm really not there right now. I don't have like that person that I really want to talk to in my life. It's just I like you and I like our friends.
Yeah, well, hey,
like the people in the community and stuff like that. I don't like look up. It's just weird how things have been kind of shifting, but I don't sort of have those sporting idols or things like that anymore going on. It was kind of like that when I started, and I think there's a lot of people out there that are very compelling on some level, but just because the more you get to know, I don't know, that sounds really crazy to say that, but I think, yeah, maybe outside of triathlon would be my thing. I would like to, maybe like Wim Hof, I'd like to have him on, actually, the Iceman.
All right, now that you say a non-tri, I would 100% have Ryan Holiday on the podcast. 100%.
Oh,
yeah,
exactly. That's how we kind of started thinking about it too.
He is like the one. He is the one dude I would definitely have on the podcast. As I would definitely fanboy over having some Ryan Holiday. He is my favorite author and a very cool human. But yeah, I think I would have them on. So I don't.
Wim Hof and Ryan Holiday. That's who we're going for.
If you guys are listening or have the connection or the hookup, or you guys want to independently email them on your own as our agent, hey, I think you would really increase your listener base, and increase revenue by being on this very small mediocre podcast that has nothing to do with triathlon. Come on aboard. So I don't know much about the guests I like to have on, but I do know about Ironman Freakouts. Why? Because it's the season. I go through.
It's the season. It's coming, huh?
Dude, no, it's not coming. It is here. Okay, it has arrived. August is because like it always happens like no matter what for every single race, but it's very, very dealing with athletes that are getting close to an Ironman is, I would have to imagine, is like very similar to dealing with like a bridezilla. The closer you get to the wedding day, everything is amplified. It's like their antennas go up and everything is on like high alert. I'm worried about everything. I'm checking everything. I'm unsure about everything. This has to be perfect. This has to be right. Yes, it is that time of year because in August is the worst month because there are very few big time races. Most races, like because for athletes who were training like all year for a September, October, November, even like early December Iron, they kind of get distracted, right? With like the other 70.3s that are going on. They've got their B and their C races. they got things they're focused on in the interim, that happen in April, May, and June, sometimes mid to late July. So they have kind of something to kind of, like they've got their engagement parties and they got their showers and they got things like, oh, this is fun and this is great. And it's not really high stress. I'm just going to get things. And then it's time for the real deal. And that's when things get interesting. And that's like the month of August. It is like the race time, the pre-race time is over, 70.3s, Olympics, everything's gone. And now it's time to literally freak out about everything that we do in every single session. And the hottest time, which is again, this time always makes it worse. It's like the hottest time of the year, the time of year where if you are seeing any kind of fitness gains, then basically multiply them by 20 of what you'll see in the fall. Because that it just like combine that with also, like just how general, like it's just that time of year, right? It's a stressful time of year. Kids are going back to school this month. People's lives are going back to, different ways in terms of, your kids weren't out of school. Now they're back in school. Schedules are changing. You're tired. You're in like, you're either in full Ironman build or you've been in it for a little bit and you're just tired and you're grumpy and the pressure is mounting and the expectations you're starting to feel it more. So everything that you do, every session is heightened, everything. You're probably spending way too much time on the Facebook groups where people are hearing about, well, my cousin Billy, he changes the tires of local receptionist at the county office. And she said that her brother is high up in the office and they're questioning whether if they've got the permit for miles 57 to 59. So I don't know, dude. I think the race is going to get canceled. I'm just I have it on like, shut the hell up. Like, but that's the kind of intel people usually like throw out. But it just leads to ultimately August is a month where I should charge a copay and like come sit on my couch and let's talk about where we can get you psychologically, because most of the work physiologically is probably already done. We're putting the icing on the cake. Now it's time to get your head right and remember why you did this in the first place and to keep having fun and not to be such a prisoner of the moment every single second of every day.
Man, yeah, it's because I'm going through it too. I won't say I'm doing the Ironman freak out, but I'm certainly having to kind of turn the screws a little bit right now. And that's the way I sort of do it. It's almost like I freak out in reverse almost. Like, I'm like, man, I got to, sooner or later, I'm going to have to really turn it up, and that's kind of like my panic is sort of when does that time start? And I've actually kind of hit a good place with it. So now I just know it's more like I just got to suck it up for the next, 6-7 weeks. I mean, that's kind of how, and like you've talked about before in the most recent cast, a lot about this late build kind of thing or the late big blocks and starting a little bit later to really get intense, because I think that's always been sort of my backdoor MO is that I don't want to get too tired early, and kind of, it's hard for me to keep that level of consistency. And I also think that there's something to be said for kind of ramping things up a little later and getting that spark, and that's sort of what I'm starting to feel. I'm kind of getting excited actually now that I've turned a little bit of a corner and I feel the fitness kind of coming around and then it seems familiar, how I'm like, okay, yeah, this is kind of what I remember now. And I couldn't remember it about 2 months ago. I was like, where is that? What is that? And now it's like, I guess in a way it's sort of like, what I always talk about walking the plank. It's kind of like, all right, you got no turning back now. You just got to put your head to the grind and kind of just get through it. And but I say get through it, but I've really kind of been enjoying it because I don't know about you, but there's really not a better feeling for me than when I go through training and I start to feel that fitness. You know what I mean? Like those 40-mile rides are kind of not seeming like a big deal anymore.
Of course, that's the greatest feeling because
it's unbelievable, really.
Like, and that's one of like the main things that I tell athletes when they're doing, either it's been a while since they've done their Ironman build or they're kind of, if they're wondering, what do I look for in this time of year? What should I be looking for? What can I do better? And the number one thing I always look for, especially this time of year, with it being so hot and athletes under so much stress and so much fatigue, the number one thing I say is, how are you recovering from sessions? If you're recovering well from the load and your hours continue to go up week after week after week, and you're bouncing back, then things are going wonderfully. It's about how you're recovering and how you're handling the load, because that is what it's all about for long course racing, for especially for Ironman. It's about how your body handles that amount of stress and that amount of intensity and that much volume over the course of week after week after week. If you're doing a ton of volume, you're not going to see breakthrough workouts where you feel like you're the freshest person on the planet. Why? Well, because you haven't taken a day off in a month and you're putting in anywhere from 12 to 17 hours a week in the hottest part of the year. What do you expect, right? Like, but it's surprising because so many athletes still expect to see like massive gains every time they come out on a Tuesday. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, if you're even like close, your body's adapting. Okay. If you're even like not regressing, but your numbers aren't the same, but you're still recovering. And like, that's like the biggest thing. You wake up the next day after a long ride or hard session, you're like, man, I really expected to be, tired today and sore, but I feel pretty good. Then we are on the right track. The dose is about perfect. Things are great. A great comment I look for as a coach is when an athlete says, I really feel like I'm absorbing the load, really, really well, which means the dose is correct. The athlete is performing well. They're doing they're sticking to the intention of every workout. They're not over biking or overrunning. They're not doing too much. They're taking care of themselves. Like, that's what you look for this time of year. And I generally think that, and then again, like, I'm not advocating for Joe Blow coming off the street, going from couch to Ironman in 6 to 8 weeks. It's not what I condone. It's not what I suggest. However, the athlete that has been, and I can't put this in like, font 45 or caps, like, the gigantic caps, consistent all year long, right? Because a lot of athletes that we work with on a year-round basis, they average anywhere from like 8 to 12 hours a week. If you're that consistent year-round, give me 7 weeks. Give me 7 weeks to get you ready to a really good Ironman performance. My thing is that, yes, you might leave 2 to 3% performance on the table by having that approach. But what you're doing from a percentage standpoint, in my opinion, for most athletes, 90% of athletes, is I'm raising the percentage in you getting to the start line healthy, fresh, and mentally and emotionally engaged. And for most people, that's what you want. A 20-week Ironman build where you're hammering yourself into the ground. No, thank you. Like, you get burnt out physically first, or you get burnt out mentally, emotionally, or you end up hurting yourself. Like, and again, like, that's just one of those things where I would always rather come into an Ironman not undertrained, but just slightly under what I would, normally, want to do. But I just want to be fresh, and I want to be fit, and I want to give myself a shot, versus coming into a race so tired and so exhausted and so overtrained that the length of the taper I would need to actually get unloaded and fresh would just leave me stale and, with not much in the tank to give that day. Like, and that's why I think, again, if you're able to do 3.5 hour rides and you're 7-8 weeks out from a race, come get you some, because that is where you want to be. Especially if you've been consistent at it. You can just go out on think about it. If you can just go out on a ride and chomp off 60, 70, 80 miles, of course you can do like a 7 or 8 week build and be ready to rumble. Like, you can jump up to, especially for the riding, like the running's a little more specific and a little bit harder to manipulate, just because you have to be really, really consistent running wise, but it's not that hard. It just takes you to be very delicate and very appropriate with it. But mentally, and again, like, your body can only absorb so much load for a specific period of time before it kind of gets used to it. And it's like, okay, what else you got for me? Like, I know that you think this works and it worked for 6-7 weeks, but I got it. I figured you out. You're not going to get that much fitter by doing this for that much longer. So now what are you going to do? That's going to mean more volume, more hours, a different intensity. So like, you can do things for 7 to 9 weeks, whatever, 8 weeks, rarely 6, but around that kind of, the happy medium to me is like 7 to 9 max. And then that is it. And because your body's like, oh, I haven't seen this before. This has been a while. Like, let me go ahead and adapt really, really quickly. And then You can do it. You don't get tired. You don't get worn out. You're just feeling fresh. You're feeling ready to go. And here we are. And that's how I would want to walk into a race.
Mm. Well, that kind of dovetails into a thought I had while I was riding in Nashville at the lab the other day. And I had this feeling like I don't feel like I'm in really great 70.3 shape, but I feel like I might be in better Ironman shape at this point. Now, does that make any sense? Because I just feel like I don't have that top end, but I also feel like I've got kind of a solid stableness about me. And I just found that kind of an interesting thought when because I used to ride a lot out at the airport, the lab, and I would be able to kind of blast it. But in some ways, I feel like I kind of have a little more patience, or sort of like a stableness, like I was saying, or a ability to really kind of sink into my pace and just kind of stay there. Does that make any sense to you, or is that just like sound ridiculous?
Well, I'm not going to say it sounds ridiculous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, but
the craziest ideas start with crazy ideas.
That's right. And so I wouldn't say that it's ridiculous. I would say that's more of a feeling than a actual like physical response. Like you might be in a zone where, especially if you've done races before and you've done 70.3s where you felt fit, but you also felt fast, right? And that's how you really want to feel going into
right.
Especially if you're going to race it. It's like, I want to feel fit and I want to feel fast. And if you're not feeling fast, but you're just feeling kind of what I would consider fit and sturdy, that's what I consider being in, how you would feel going into Ironman shape. Yes, you want to feel fit. Yes, you want to feel somewhat fast, but you want to feel sturdy. Like your long rides and your long runs, you don't feel like your body is giving way. You don't feel like everything is collapsing. You're breaking down, you're recovering quickly. Like to me, that's long course racing. Like it's not how fast you go, it's how little you slow down. And so I think that's more of coming from a guy like you who's done a lot of fulls, who's done a lot of halves, like what you feel like going into a 70.3. You feel fit, you feel crisp, right? Crisp is a word that I always use with athletes when they talk about, how should I feel going into a 70.3? You should feel crisp. Like you should feel fit and to do the distance, but you should feel fast. Going into an Ironman, yes, you want to feel crisp when you get out there, sure, but you want to feel fresh and sturdy. And you can absorb and handle the day. And because I also think it's a mindset, right? And that's, we always talk about horses for courses. Athletes that do better on specific types of courses or in specific kinds of conditions. It's also a mindset. Are you a person who likes to absolutely full throttle, gas it from start to go? Or are you a person, like I had this conversation with an athlete earlier this week we've been working together for 5 years, 5 years now. And she started like check off bucket lists. Like she was like, I've done a marathon, never thought I would do one. We did an Ironman, never thought I would do one. Now I think I want to do a 50K. Like she's just kind of bucket list crossing off. She's super consistent. She gets all the work done. And I was like, well, but her mentality is steady Eddie. I can go for a long period of time and I can just keep on moving. That's her mentality. That's what she likes to do. And if you like to do something, they're going to keep doing it and you're going to do more of it and you're going to enjoy it more. So you're probably going to do it again. So what I told her was, I think that fits your personality, like the way where you are mentally and just how you are. You like to go long. It's a different mentality than going short.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's. So I think what you're feeling is probably a combo of, you're not racing a 70.3. So you don't have that mindset of I've got to go fast, I've got to rip it. And a lot of people, I know in my experience in the past, like my best races, my best fulls have been on very, very short, almost like surprisingly short builds, because I would go from training like 70.3s and getting really fast. And now I'm going to take my fast and make it far. But I like that kind of, because 70.3s, at least when I go out and race them, I'm going for like around about a time. But then when I start training for a full, it's about just getting the time in and putting in volume, which is, to me, is just less stress. It's not about paces. It's not about, a ton of power output, and trying to raise this and raise that. It's just about how much longer can I go? And generally for me, that's always where I've been successful, is I can just go. I can just keep going for a long period of time. Am I going to beat you from point A to point B? Probably not. I'll probably beat you from point A to point Z though. And I think that just comes as a mentality and how you approach things, but also knowing that that's what you have coming around the corner. So I think again, what I'm saying, it's not ridiculous, but I think it's more symbolic of where your head is and where your head has put your body than vice versa.
Mm. Well, that makes sense because normally when I used to train out at that airport, I would just go throw down. I mean, it would always be about speed and quick recoveries and speed and quick recoveries. And I was just like, I was trying to throw a little bit of that in there. And I'm like, man, that doesn't feel right. So like, I've been training a different way kind of too, which is interesting. And I think it is more based on the volume approach than intensity, although, and again, it's sort of like my intensity now is not the speed work as much as I'm just finding hills, and it's that strength and sturdy like you're talking about. I want to kind of like just go back to what you're saying a little bit because I think it's an important part of people that, may have just done Ohio 70.3 and then they're facing their Ironman in maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks or whatever like that, and they're the constant fear of not running enough and the constant fear of not biking far enough and things like that, and how so many people, like we've talked about before, have this fictitious thing about they have to do 5 century rides or whatever it may be. And I can you just kind of go into that a little bit more as far as like, hey, if you're in really good 70.3 shape, then we've got 6, 7 weeks or whatever. It's not a bad position at all, even though you might think you're not. Like, it's almost like, the mentality is I have to do double. And that isn't necessarily the case.
No, and it's also, again, like I said, it's very, very, very dependent on how consistent the athlete has been year in and year out. And like you might see, especially if you're in one of these absolutely ridiculous, Ironman Chattanooga Facebook groups. It's like, yeah, I'm heading out today for my third 100 miler, then I'm going to run 25 miles off the bike today. I think I'll be ready. Of course you will. It might take you 6 weeks to recover, but good luck with that. Like, what you don't see, because all people do in those groups, and this is what causes so much hysteria, is, I see so-and-so doing this. Should I be doing this? No, you shouldn't, because you know what? While they were sitting on their ass from September, October, all the way through March, not doing jack, you know what we were doing? Putting in work, 10, 12 hours a week, being consistent. They were doing literally nothing. They're trying to catch up to being in shape. We are already in shape. So now all we got to do is take your current fitness level and make it Ironman fitness level. That's it. So that's when you see all these like ridiculous distances and brick workouts, like that's just for Joe Blow down the street. And honestly, it's all for paper. It's just what you're going to put on paper. It has nothing to do with how good they're going to be on race day.
It's lack of confidence to me.
It's 100%, or just lack of knowledge and knowing what's right and what's wrong from the person who's putting the plan or the thing they bought on Training Peaks or whatever it is. It's like, it's just way too much. And for most athletes, they can't handle it. Even for the athletes that, like if you're running 4, 5, 6 times a week and you have it all year long, like jumping up in mileage is not that hard because you've already been putting it in throughout the week. Let's say you're an athlete who averages, 30 to 40 miles a week, or you look at your hours, and you did it 5 to 6 times. Now just like whittle it down to doing it 3 or 4 times to make a couple of those runs longer, and get used to being on your feet for longer periods of time, in a single session, not just spread out over the course of the week. Same thing goes for rides. Hit it hard during the week. On the weekend, just go long. Listen, if you can ride 3.5 hours, you can ride 5. I'm just telling you, you can ride 5. You'll have to take it easy, but you can ride 5. It's just about continuing to increase your aerobic capacity and making your body as aerobically efficient as you possibly can. Because Ironman, for 99.9% of us is an aerobic event. It is with oxygen. And so you obviously want to top off the cake and still do some harder stuff. But for the most part, it's about just being really, really aerobically efficient. And so I will tell you this, if you're a person who's like getting psyched out by, seeing all these insanely, long bike rides and runs these people do, don't let it psych you out. Let it pump you up, because like you're going to be toast come race day. You're going to put in so many, weekend warrior workouts that you're going to have really nothing left. You're going to start thinking to yourself, When is this over with? I'm so tired of doing these because you know what? You don't even have a match to burn because you already burnt them all. And that's the thing is you want to, by staying crisp and getting like into focus for a race, like you want to be building up your match and then use it once on race day. You don't want to use it every single weekend. And so don't just look at someone's week and think, oh, well, more, because more isn't always better. Less isn't always better either. It's very dependent on the athlete and how you've done things. But again, like I said, if you're a person who's been very, very consistent for a long period of time, it ain't that hard to bridge up and to do it. And again, like I said, you might leave 2 to 3% on the table from a performance standpoint of then extending it out to 12 weeks. But every block you do, every 2 to 3 week block you do, in addition to what you're doing, increases your chance of getting sick, getting hurt, overtraining, getting injured, something like that. Your chances continue to increase astronomically once you get over that 6 to 8 period of time, because your body becomes so tired and so fatigued, and your mind starts to wander, and everything, you start to become grumpy, and you have to stay on your fuel, and you have to recover right. That's when things start to get hairy. And the success rate, I think, dwindles from that aspect, because it's about getting the start line fresh. Like that's why Ironman, oversells every race, because they know they're going to get, 400 to 500 do not starts, either because life got in the way or they got in their own way and got hurt, or they got burnt out and don't want to even do it anymore. Like that's, think about that. Think how much money Ironman makes from people who never show up. Spend a single dime on, except for their goodie bag, so like that. But that's just the truth. And again, like if you look at, and it's not just an age group thing, like when you're pushing the boundaries of, of what you can do, like if you look at the top marathon runners and the Olympians, like at some point in their career, they've all had to take time off from stress fractures, because when you're pushing yourself to that limit to squeeze every single ounce out of your ability to try to meet the expectations and the criteria to meet a certain level of performance against a world-class field, you have to do that. You have to push yourself to that nth degree. We don't, right? Like, or you shouldn't, like we do this as a hobby, not to win an Olympic gold or to be a professional or to win money or to put food on our table. We pay money actually to go do this as a hobby. So the last thing you should want to do is ever, teeter on that line of am I hurting myself, or am I getting fitter? Am I getting faster? Like being utterly exhausted. And that's become like a badge of honor these days. Like, I'm crushing this on 4 hours of sleep. Well, you suck, right? Get some more sleep. Like you're not doing anything good for yourself. Like go get some sleep. You don't get extra credit for getting less sleep. Just like you don't get extra credit for running an extra 45 minutes on your long run. What you may have just done is actually hurt yourself and regressed because you asked too much of your body one day. And so it's about being really, really smart and getting the start line fresh.
Somehow, some way, I've actually started sleeping a lot better over the last few weeks, and it makes such a big difference in that idea that kind of looking forward to workouts and really feeling like you want to go do it versus that grinder of like dragging yourself out the door and everything like that. And I just love that, what you were saying there, and about, was it Sebastian Kienle that had the quote about if you're super confident about your race, you're probably overtrained or something like that?
Yeah,
Is that for Daniel?
It was Sebastian Kienle said if you're really confident going into a race, you're probably overtrained.
Yeah. So that's my thing, is always goes back to this sort of, view from above in this of my training, in this idea that Ironman is one day. And we've talked about that before. It's like one day you got to pull it together. So how do you time it in a way that one day is sort of like, just that big, exciting training day that you're looking forward to, that you're not quite positive you're totally ready for, but you think you are. And if you have that attitude and that, and a little bit of freshness to it versus like, oh my God, I got to go through this tomorrow kind of thing. That to me, that's sort of how I look at everything. Is kind of like, if I can wake up for that race and just be like, this is going to be awesome, man. There's like, supported, workouts all day, and there's people around cheering and all that kind of stuff. And if you can just feel good, be in the right mindset with that, and know that and I really love that I've been using this in the ballpark thing a lot, so much lately, but kind of overkill, but knowing that I'm there and now we're going to get to see it. And one of the other things is always is understanding what burning that match means, right? And if you know you haven't burnt it, but you know how that feels, and you've gotten close to it a few times in training, but you've pulled back. For me, one of the things is the bike. It's, that it's going to hurt and it's going to suck a little bit, but you got to kind of suck it up and push through. And I think I can do that one day a year, and that's the thing. I always just try to be in the range of that, knowing that I can do that. Like if I'm out riding on a 70, 80 mile ride, and I'm like, man, I got to keep pushing for another 30 miles or something. Could I do it? Yeah, but I'm not doing it today. And I think, that's the undertrained angle of it. And certainly what you're saying is if people have been riding 70, 80 miles for many months and not burning out, they're going to be in a lot better position. But I take that risk a little bit more,
Well, it's not just about, like it's not about being undertrained, right? It's not like you want to be appropriately trained. Like that's not something that like this podcast isn't about undertraining for an Ironman. It's about being appropriately trained and fit and fresh. It's about what it is more about is being not overtrained and not going through the monotonous, boring, just because 100-mile ride in zone 1 and zone 2. Well, like that's like a slow death to me. Like go out, like, because you might have a person who goes out and rides 100 miles and they probably stop 5 or 6 times, and then they go and they pedal zone 1 and zone 2, and they probably did it with their buddy, so they're drafting for half of it, and it might take them, like 6 hours. Like, well, the same person who might only have, the bandwidth or the time availability or just like the want to do, is they might go out and do, a couple 4.5-hour rides, but that includes a whole lot of intensity.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in, they're creating just as much, in some cases more stress than you are. And obviously you always need to add in like the aerobic component of it, because it is an aerobic sport. But there's just a lot to be said for different ways in the non-traditional, they're not even traditional, just the non-stock training plan way, days of 100-mile ride, 120-mile ride, a couple weeks out. Like, it's not the same. That's not how most people do things. It's how training plans are written, because training plans aren't written for you. They're written for a plan, and they're written because the person who's generating the plan just wants you to know that you can cover the distance. It's not about covering the distance quickly. It's about covering the distance in general. But the goal is to cover it quickly. And going into races where you're having beaten yourself down after, with multiple 100-mile rides that are boring and exhausting in the middle of the heat in the summer, that just absolutely drain you to death and leave you giving nothing for the next day, when you have to probably go out and, sloth your way through a 3.5-hour misery run that's going to wreck you for 4 days. Like, what are you practicing? How is that making you better? It's not. It's just running you through the ringer. Because if you can't get up the next day and run again after a Sunday run, you went too far. That's
Mm-hmm.
like you did too much. Like, you should, like, sometimes I'll have just swims on Monday. They're never days off, but a lot of times, even after, like, they might ride long on a Saturday morning, do 5.5 hours with some hard intervals. They might run in the PM, then they will run Sunday morning, maybe a longer run. And then the next day, it's either just a swim, but a lot of times it's also a run. Like, you shouldn't be that shelled to where you can't do anything the next day. That means it was too much. Like, if you can't do anything the next day, it was too much. Like, the point is to continuously absorb the training, not to overload yourself, because then it becomes not about absorbing the training load. It becomes about recovering and repairing the body you just destroyed, only to do what? Let it recover for 4 or 5 days and then destroy it again on the next weekend. And then you wonder why you can't move fast and you end up walking more than half of the marathon on race day. That's why. Like, you got to take, because that stuff doesn't take, when you continuously do that to yourself week in and week out for 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 weeks, there is no 2-week taper that's going to get rid of that for you, because you've beaten your body down so much. It's not going to be Chris. That's why if you feel flat in your Ironman, that's why you feel flat and slow and wasted. That's why, because you have dug yourself into such a hole that you didn't make nearly as much progress as you could have because you spent more of your time repairing your body from the damage you did on these insanely ridiculous, long, and sometimes purposeless workouts that what do you expect on race day except to feel the same? Like, like if you ever, outside of like the occasional nutritional and fueling mistake, right? Like you ate like crap the night before, you didn't drink enough water, you forgot a bottle. You should never describe a long run as a death march in training. Ever. It means it's too long. It means it's too long. Like it's just, and that again, I had a question earlier speak about why we always prescribe long runs and time and not mileage, because that's the best way to handle and predict how much stress a person's going to have. If I'm telling you to run an hour, I know I'm going to get an hour worth of stress. If I tell you to run 15 miles and you have a really bad day and you take it on totally different terrain and totally different temperatures, and it might be a 30-minute difference. That's a lot. That's a lot to teeter on. And that's in terms of going from overtrained or being, appropriate. It's just too much stress and it's way too much risk. And so many Ironman athletes take that risk every single weekend this time of year, and it just drives them into the ground. It's more about, like you said before, it's more about lack of confidence and being insecure about being able to do it than it is actually about the process of getting better and being fit for race day.
It's like living on the extremes too. I struggle with that, but it's sort of like that. All right, I got to catch up, and then I'm like, I'm shelled, and I got to take a few days, and then come back, and it's like this big peaks and valleys kind of approach. But when I hear an athlete say, I don't know, I just feel really good, then I know we're getting somewhere, and it's sort of like the extreme approach to everything. I've been doing even walk runs, right? And I talk about how I walk for a minute, but when I come out of a run segment, I don't just slam on the brakes, It's kind of like, how do you ease in and out of different things? And I like that as far as a training thing goes. It's sort of, how do you ease out of a big workout and then you ease into the next one? And if I'm going to start running out of my walk run, I don't just, go from 0 to 60. I go up the scale and take it easy, because I think everything we do to our muscles, with that extreme approach of start, stop, go fast, whatever, it takes little bites out of you, and it's sort of like climbing a hill on your bike or whatever. It's like, you don't just dig into it all the time. You kind of want to be going the right speed into it, and then you just sort of work your gears in the right way and go up it in a controllable way. And I think there's such a emphasis on everything's not a time trial, and it's not an explosive sprint to get to the front kind of thing. You have to manage your efforts in and out of workouts as well.
It's like you said, like managing, and listen, and that's the hardest part of what we do as athletes and what you and I do as coaches is managing load. Because no week is really perfect. Like there's still things you have to do and tweak with each athlete. Like we had an athlete earlier this week who I changed their workout on I changed Wednesday to an easy. No, I gave them Tuesday off, and then I gave an easy spin on Wednesday. And then they still weren't. They just I think I'm just tired. I think I might be getting sick. What? And I was like, then take another day off. Like it's about managing load. It's about managing expectations within that load and seeing that a day or two off here is nothing in the scheme of things. Like a day or two off is nothing, especially if it leads to 3 weeks of consistency. But what oftentimes happens is you don't take a day off. And what does it lead to? 3 weeks off of overtrained, sick, hurt, whatever it is. Like it's all about load management. It's all about being realistic. And the best athletes that I work with that get the most out of themselves are the ones that recognize when they're starting, before it happens, or start to feel tired or irritable. That's when it's time to pull back. That's when. So another like the big piece of advice, like change course before you know you need it. Change course a day or two before. Like if you feel like you're getting sick, or you feel like you might get a niggle, or you feel like your legs turn into concrete, take the day off. Go for an easy spin. Go for an easy swim. If we want to move things around, nothing wrong with that either. But don't go out and run your track workout or your threshold, on Trainer Road. Like, don't continue to smash yourself because you have this fear of missing a workout. Like, who cares? Like all you're doing is sabotaging your future performance by continuing to dig yourself a hole. Because at some point, guess what? You're not going to dig yourself out because you're going to break your shovel. And that's what happens this time of year for so many athletes when stress is high and heat is high, expectations are high, the pressure is mounting as race day is coming. Athletes continue to dig and to dig and to dig and to dig and to dig. And next thing you know, they're done. And they stay there until November, December, January, and then they try to do it again. Don't try and do it again. Just let's do it right the first time.
I like that, man.
Sorry if I'm being preachy today.
That's all right. That's good. Can I shift the gear real quick? And
Want to? I mean, this is 50% your podcast, so you can do whatever you want.
well, I would just like to address the move of Ironman Wisconsin, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh boy, I knew this was coming.
Well, I have one question for you.
Yeah.
Why?
Money.
You told me. Well, yeah, money. I'm sick
did.
of money.
Listen, I am too. But listen, listen. I pile on Ironman just like the next person does. But stop blaming everything on them. Like they can only hold events. Like remember, Ironman is a business first and a race second. Like people just tend to they're this non-for-profit race entity that just likes to put on these huge events that everyone wants to go and attend. That's not who they are. They're a business. So if you think they're into making bad business decisions, then you're wrong. But what they can only do is hold events in cities on days and dates that they are allowed to. Like that's the deal. Like, yes, there'd be a lot of speculation about, because there's some rumors that Des Moines really wants to put on a full Ironman, and that'll kind of take the place of where Wisconsin was. But the last year or two with the Wisconsin 70.3 date coming in, from what I know, it's a city move, and so like everyone else thinks, well, they're doing it because of Des Moines. Well, what they probably don't understand is, well, they're probably doing Des Moines because Madison had to move, not vice versa. From my understanding, it was about just how busy and how, which I think is a great thing from the city of Madison. Like I loved going to the football game when I came to spectate your race, 8 years ago. Went to the football game the day before, did a little bit of tailgating, and then, watched the race the next day. It was a home game. But I can also see from that standpoint, like how insanely hard it is to get hotel rooms there, close to it. So I think what they're trying to do is just kind of spread things out. But it's not always Ironman's fault. Like they can only put races on dates that, like it's think about it, it would be significantly harder for them to move a date than it would be to keep a date, because you've already got a date locked in you've had for 19 years, right? And there's no qualm. So why would you move it unless you had to? I don't, I know it's like, oh, well, it's, no one's going to train for it. I'm like, yes, they are. People train for races in April and June.
Yeah.
So stop. People aren't going to train. Well, I'm not going to have any time to do my hill work. I'm not going to, well, if you want to race it, you're going to train the way you need to train and race it. Especially, I don't want to hear you complaining about hills if you have, your fancy schmancy smart trainer.
Yeah, but
it's unfortunate. It is, because I always associate Wisconsin with fall and just like going and wearing a hoodie on race morning. Like those are the things that I love about that town, and I love about that city, and I love about that race date. So I think the June date for next year is difficult. I think it's gonna be hard to swallow. It could be perfect weather. It could not be perfect weather. So, but who knows? But it's kind of, anytime you move a race, like when they moved Louisville, I always kind of get uneasy about it, because
they ruined it.
Yeah, they ruined it. They ruined.
That's what I always think. I agree. Yeah, obviously they're a business, right? But I also remember. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. Because I also remember when I was in the television business back in the day, and they were so big. Like Ironman is basically a monopoly in the sport, and they could do anything they wanted, and they were just starting to get more and more into like cutting costs and expense. They weren't really focused necessarily on the product. And my theory on this is, since they had to move the half onto the same day, and they're like, okay, this might work. And since the half wasn't the half in June before?
Yeah, I think it's around the
same
day.
So now they have that date already too. So to your point about they have the date, so now let's just put them both together, on the same day, and then we don't have to close the city down for 2 separate times. We can squeeze all that money into one day. But in the meantime, we're ruining a perfect race. That's my problem with it. I mean, you got whatever, 20 years they've had probably perfect weather, 18 of them. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. But then I do think that there's a logistical problem with, a lot of people want to do that race. They're from around up north in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, whatever, Illinois. And they can't get out on that course now for maybe more than 2 weeks. And then how are you going to, there's no open water swim really ahead of June that much. And students are gone, people in Wisconsin like taking vacations in June. And I worry about the crowd support because that's a huge part of that race as well. And I don't know. I just don't, I know it's a business, but at some point it's like, you can do so much before people stop going to your business. And I think that's what you're seeing with like television right now. And there's more options, there's more things to do, and you can't just do anything just to cut costs here and there and, finagle around. Why do you ruin? I mean, that's what I felt like with Louisville, even though it was in the summer and it was terrible. People liked that race because it was always there. They always used to draw fairly well. And they moved it to the fall, and then it just fell apart. And maybe, I'm sure the city does have a lot to do with it, obviously, but I always felt like, there is a home football game in September, and you have a big weekend. You always make your big events bigger. You don't make like terrible events mediocre, and that's kind of what it feels like to me. So that's all I got to say about that.
We're naming it Clash.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they keep screwing around. The Clash might be taking over.
I don't think they have to worry about the Clash. They probably saw that name change. They're like, we can do whatever we want to now.
Yeah, we'll put Wisconsin in January.
Exactly. Like, and people still sign up over that one. But yeah, it is. It's unfortunate. So we'll see how it goes. Just like we saw how this podcast would go. If you race this weekend, good luck to you. Hope you go out and have a great race, have some fun, execute well, put your best effort down, and just kind of see what happens and leave the rest. If you haven't been or want to go back and need more information, go to our website. It's C26triathlon.com. It is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. You can always click on the coaching tab, find more about our club membership and our full staff of coaches. I think everyone has availability, so check through those, see who fits you best. Also follow us on Instagram at C26_triathlon. And if you need anything from us individually, you can reach out to Mike. He is at crushingiron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me, I'm at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. Enjoyed it.
All right, dude. Talk to you later.
I got to get to training. Talk to you later.